the story of Cain and Abel. We know it well. We'll be talking today about whether we have the spirit of Cain or the spirit of Abel when we worship God together. And even on our own. So let's read verses 1 to 16 and we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, Adam had sexual relations with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant. And when she gave birth to Cain, she said, "With the Lord's help, I have produced a man." And later she gave birth to his brother and named him Abel. When they grew up, Abel became a shepherd while Cain cultivated the ground. When it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best of the firstborn lambs from his flock. And the Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. And this made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. "Why are you so angry?" the Lord asked Cain. "Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you. But you must subdue it and be its master." One day Cain suggested to his brother, "Let's go out into the fields." And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Afterwards, the Lord asked Cain, "Where is your brother? Where is Abel?" "I don't know," Cain responded. "Am I my brother's guardian?" But the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are cursed and banished from the ground, which has swallowed your brother's blood. No longer will the ground yield good crops for you, no matter how hard you work. From now on, you'll be a homeless wanderer on the earth." Cain replied to the Lord, "My punishment is too great for me to bear. You've banished me from the land and from your presence. You've made me a homeless wanderer. Anyone who finds me will kill me." The Lord replied, "No, for I will give a sevenfold punishment to anyone who kills you." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain to warn anyone who might try to kill him. And so Cain left the Lord's presence, and he settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Spirit of Cain or the spirit of Abel when we worship. I have to admit I've been kind of struggling lately with the McDonald's up here. Seems like every time I go there, they get my order wrong. And it's not every time, but it's a lot of the time. I'll pull up and I'll be at the speaker, and they'll say, "What would you like?" And I'll say, "Yes, I'd like a large coffee. I want a shot of espresso, shot of caramel, a couple of cream with that." And then I'll drive to the window, and I'm not kidding you, 7 times out of 10, they're missing something. It's either the caramel or the espresso, but they still want my money for it, of course. And I don't usually find out till after I've started drinking that something's missing there. I ordered a large iced coffee the other day, and they charged me for two. And I was wondering why it was so expensive, and it didn't dawn on me. I just thought, well, maybe the extra stuff I put in it is that expensive. So they handed me two coffees, and I said, well, I only ordered one. About a month ago, I got to the window. They sent the card reader out the window for my Visa card, and I paid for what I thought was my order, only to have a different order handed to me when I got to the window. Turns out I'd paid for the guy in behind me. So so I paid for mine and paid for his, and well, they finally got it all right. I went to the curb and waited for them to bring it all out. Um, so I mean, it's stuff like that. And it seems like it happens way too often, and it can be aggravating. Why can't they get my order right? It's not all that hard. And I wonder if that's kind of what was going on with Cain and Abel. Cain, why can't you get my order right? If you do well, will you not be accepted? God asks him. And sometimes I wonder if we need to ask ourselves that question about coming to God when we worship. Sometimes we get into a certain routine and a rhythm of how worship is supposed to be. And Are we doing it right? I mean, we have to ask that question. Are we doing it right? Are we doing what God is asking us to do when we get together to worship on a Sunday morning, or when we spend time worshiping Him on our own, wherever that is? God has certain things that He's looking for from us when we come on Sunday mornings. For instance, Jesus said, watch and pray. And ask often, because the Father is generous. And yet it's very few churches that have well-attended prayer meetings anymore. Jesus said, love one another and put the needs of others first. And yet far too many churches are weakened by me first kind of stuff and division. Paul said, examine yourselves and repent when you come together for the Lord's Supper. But then he said the fact that you aren't doing that has led to increasing illness and even death in your congregation. Those are sobering words. Those are sobering words. Are we worshiping God in the spirit of Cain or in the spirit of Abel? Critically important question, especially as we look forward to reopening our ministries this fall. Jesus made it clear that he wasn't thrilled with how people put their own desires ahead of God's when they're worshiping and getting together. He said, you hypocrites, you teach the commandments of men as if they come from God, and you hold to the traditions and preferences of people over the commands of God. And in Luke chapter 12, he teaches a parable about a master who punishes his servants for not carrying out his orders. So that begs the question, does God have a certain way that is better to worship him than others? And the answer to that is a resounding yes, he does. If you do well, will you not be accepted? He asks Cain, who was pouting. So how can we do well here on Sunday morning? How do we do well in our personal worship time before we come together? We've looked at this passage before. We're going to take a look at it again. Let's go to Acts chapter 2 in verses 42 to 47. Very familiar passage. As churches, we often come back to this as sort of the benchmark for what God is looking for in our worship times in the life of the church. And it's worth another look because God says, it's kind of like he pulls up to the window and he says, yes, I'd like to order reverent obedience and devotion, loving fellowship, the breaking of bread, and consistent prayer. And when I pull up to your church, I look forward to you having filled my order correctly. Let's read it. 42 to 47, chapter 2 in Acts. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders, and all the believers met together in one place and shared everything that they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. Look at how God blessed them. Take a look at that passage again. Look at how God blessed them when they did these things. And the Lord added to their numbers every day those who were being saved. And they were praising God, living generously with each other, and having favor with people in their community, the Bible says. That's what God's looking for in a church. This was a church that God could trust to carry out his orders and help new believers to grow. Nothing fancy, nothing added, just doing what God had ordered. And so he grew the church. So, what are the elements of worship that God is looking for, even in this little church? First, obedient devotion. Obedient devotion. And they devoted themselves to these four elements, verse 42 says: the apostles' teaching, loving fellowship, the breaking of bread, consistent prayer. Do we do that here as a church body? If you're from another church this morning, is your church doing that? These four things they were devoted to. Why those four things? Clearly because they'd gotten that from the Lord. And so they were devoted to it. And this is the devotion that God looks for in us. I have to admit, I kind of cringe sometimes when I hear people talk about doing their devotions. It's kind of like we've reduced it to this 10-minute block of reading from our daily bread before we go to work, kind of like how we brush our teeth and fix our hair before we get on with the rest of our day. The devotion that God is looking for is an all-day, everyday focus on what he thinks is important. And we've talked about that a bit the last couple of months. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread together in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all of the people. They were devoted to worshiping God, to sharing, to teaching, and to loving fellowship, and they couldn't wait to get to church after work. Wow. Kind of like devout Catholics who go to Mass every single day. They went to the temple every day after work to share with each other and grow and worship the Lord their God together. And if they couldn't make it, they still had a devotion to the apostles' teachings and to praise and worship and to generous giving and to prayer. It was part of their lifestyle. And they got to the temple as often as possible because the temple was open every day. And they devoted themselves to these four things, the Bible says: teaching, loving fellowship, breaking of bread, consistent prayer. So let's look at those four things quickly here this morning. Number one, they were devoted to the apostles' teaching. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed, Paul says in Galatians. And Acts says they received the message with great eagerness, and they examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. God is looking for these things in his people. He's looking for these things in all the churches that he plants, no matter where they are. A devotion to his word. A devotion, in this case, for them, not to the prophets and the rabbis so much, but to the apostles and their teaching. The prophets were important too, but the apostles' teachings, who qualified what even the prophets were saying. The Word of God, why we run Sunday schools on Sunday morning. We hope to get back to that this fall. It's why we do Bible studies. It's why we do 50 plus. It's why we do our new outreach program, Club DJ. Because God is watching us, and this is what he's looking for. A devotion to the teachings of the Bible. Are we in that same category as the first church in Jerusalem? A church that loves to study God's word, a church that loves to share it with others. I hope we are, and that we're growing in that. If you do well, will you not be accepted, God asks. So that's the first thing. Secondly, God's looking for a church that's devoted to loving fellowship. What then shall we say, brothers and sisters? When you come together, each of you has a hymn or a word of instruction, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation, or a testimony like we heard this morning. Everything must be done so that the church may be built up. Let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building up one in need and bringing grace to those who are listening. God's church should be a safe place, should be a hospital where people can come and find healing, place of hope, place of love and compassion and mercy. Not a courtroom, not a Mean Girls movie, a place of healing, and above all, loving fellowship. You know, that early church would never have gotten together as often as they did if they hadn't been experiencing that. In my years of ministry, the number one reason I hear from people why they stop going to a church or stop going to church altogether is because they are not experiencing that in that fellowship. Loving fellowship. It's part of God's order, and He's watching. Thirdly, God is looking for the celebration of the cross and the resurrection, the breaking of bread, and hearts that love to share with each other. Take a look at verse 45 and 46 again. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. Verse 44, all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. And they worshiped together, verse 46, at the temple every day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and they shared their meals with great joy and generosity. These were new believers who still felt the sting of Calvary. And they shared in the sufferings of Jesus and the world's hatred of Christ. And so they loved each other. And they hung on to each other. And their worship revolved around Jesus Christ and the work at Calvary. Loving fellowship was important. It was one of the reasons they got together, but primarily they were gathering together to worship Christ and His gift for us. And a spirit of awe came over every soul, it says, and many signs and wonders were being done through the apostles. Don't we long for churches like that? Where there's a spirit of awe. God is at work in this place, and we've come with anticipation to see what He's going to do next. And for some churches, and maybe even us, it can get to the point where it's so routine that we kind of go, I know exactly what's going to happen next. And it's so easy for us to fall asleep in the presence of the Lord. And yet deep in our hearts, we long for something more. Part of finding that is coming prepared, with a heart prepared for worship. Also, knowing that when I come to this place, I'm going to experience God here. He is here. He is here. And I want to encounter Him. And Lord, I wait with anticipation to see what it is that you want to do. And in this early church, I don't think there was any boredom there. I don't think people fell asleep when Peter was speaking. Their hearts were glad and were full of generosity, and the Bible says the Lord added to their numbers daily all those who were being saved. Because He trusted this church to do what He had been asking them to do. Fourthly, prayer. None of this would be possible without persistent prayer. Prayer brings us together in spiritual intimacy. Prayer humbles us to rely on the presence of Christ. Prayer stirs up our hearts to gladness, and it adds more souls to the church. This was a church that was devoted to regular God was watching. You say, Pastor, I simply can't be like this. These are impossible obligations. I don't have the time. I would probably counsel you and say you need to make the time. It's true. It sounds trite, but it really is true. We do make time for those things that are important to us, don't we? I've been saying for 30 odd years, you live what you believe. So take a look at what you're doing and what you're living. That's what you really believe. We live what we believe. Take time. Aren't you struggling in your faith without prayer? Without loving fellowship? Without a devotion to God's Word? You need to make the time. We heard from Kelsey last week, and it was there's a joyful part for me, and there was a part that was really sad because she made a statement that really struck home for me. She said, in North America and in Europe, the church is what? Do you remember? Waning, almost slowly dying. But in Asia, it's taking off like crazy. In some of those cultures, maybe you've been on missions trips to some of those cultures, you know that they get together. It's not for an hour and then, look, I got to get home and do this or that. They're usually together for hours in some of these cultures. They set Sundays aside, and sometimes other days as well, to be together in loving fellowship and to read God's Word and to pray and to worship and rejoice in the presence of the Lord. And they spend hours doing that. Some countries in Africa, that's what they do. Asia as well. In North America, some churches do that well. Many churches are doing less than they used to do. If you do well, will you not be accepted, God asks? Will I not pour out my Spirit on you? God is watching. I'm not convinced that better websites and better music and better live streaming is the ticket to the heart of God. I mean, those things are certainly important, especially for reaching out. I've heard the old timers talk about the days when their churches had Sunday morning services, Sunday evening services, Tuesday evening Bible studies, Wednesday evening prayer groups, Friday evening fellowships, and on top of all that, they'd spend time with each other going from homes to homes because there was no TVs. You didn't travel a whole lot, no smartphones, no hockey practices to take up all your time. And revivals would pop up all over the place. Often we long for those things. Revival. Are we willing to do what it takes? These are the things that God is looking for when we get together to worship Him. Obedient devotion, loving fellowship, celebrating the cross and the resurrection, and a commitment to prayer and to His holy word. And look at what comes out of this. If you read this passage, it says their hearts are on fire, there is loving fellowship, there is generosity, and there is a joy that they had never known before. And that's why God says, I want you to show love, not offer more sacrifice. I want you to get to know me more than I want your burnt offerings. If you're taking notes, that's Hosea 6:6. And if you do well, will you not be accepted? If you don't, are you not going to struggle? The spirit of Cain or the spirit of Abel? God is watching us. He's placed his order. When we pass our worship through the window, is he getting what he asked for? I want to invite you to stand before we have communion together, and we're just going to sing a wonderful old song together, just as a prayer to prepare our hearts for this time of communion. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Sing this as a prayer, guys. Let's just pray this to the Lord. Let's just bring that last one up, Brooke. Thanks. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Break me, melt me, mold me, fill me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Spend a moment in prayer. Father, are we bringing the right worship to you? Would you speak to us if we're not? Would you help us to know what an able offering is? And help us to be consistent in that as we come to exalt your name and glorify you. And as we come, would your Spirit fall on us, freshen us, make us new. Melt us, Lord, and mold us and fill us. Break us if we need it. But fashion us, Lord, in the image of your Son who spent so much time worshiping you. What an amazing fellowship the Trinity must be. And that you've invited us into that, we thank you. Help us to learn, continue to learn how to worship you rightly. And so we sing one more time. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Break me, melt me, mold me, fill me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. You can have a seat. Thank you. I'm going to ask our servers to come